Hey there, folks. How you doing? Welcome back. Today, I'd like to talk to you about intuition. Now, most of us pride ourselves in making decisions using reason, evidence, and cold hard facts. But research has told us that this really isn't the case. Sometimes I give a talk to groups of individuals discussing about decision making. And I start by discussing Sigmund Freud and how he conceptualized and postulated that there are three different people going on in our head. You have the id, driven by strong emotion and base desires. The ego, which is the logical, reason-based, rational part of the mind. And the superego, which listens to both the needs of the id as well as the ego and makes the choice. I go on to talk about the TV series Star Trek, the original series, as a backdrop to this discussion, because in our minds, each of us has these three people, according to Freud, operating when we make a choice. You got the id, who is embodied by the Dr. McCoy character. You have the logic and reason side meant to be considered Mr. Spock. And then you have Captain Kirk, who listens to both Bones McCoy and Spock and makes the choice that leads to saving the ship and saving the day. Now, science tells us that this really isn't how this all works. Basically, when we deliberate upon a decision, we always run this decision through some sort of an emotional filter. And it's only once we have gone through this intuitive sense of making a choice and determining a way to proceed does that decision get to our reasoning centers. Now, the purpose of our reasoning centers is to come up with a rational, sounding, reasonable justification for the emotional decision we have already made through the id. So in effect, the McCoy that resides in our heads controls the puppet strings of Mr. Spock. So when Captain Kirk talks to Mr. Spock, he's actually talking to McCoy regardless. Now, this phenomenon is the root of so many counterproductive ways of thinking, such as confirmation bias, primacy bias, the predilection for us to once we hear some information, it's less likely for us to dismiss that because we heard it first, and it also leads to motivated reasoning. Now, this occurs independent of our intellect at the time. So basically, very smart people fall into this problem just as much as those who are not quite as smart. And in fact, those who have a high level of intellect become very adept at building rhetorical prowess to persuade ourselves that we are right. So those of us who are smarter, who are more reasoned, often find ourselves struggling with these issues even more. Now, this has important ramifications for self-management, for leadership, and for influence. First of all, from a self-management standpoint, you should always be on guard that you might be falling into these traps, that you are falling victim to motivated reasoning. It takes a great deal of personal effort and attention to your own thinking to be open to persuasion into new ideas. It often takes the assistance of a trusted friend to keep our minds open and receptive to ideas that we may have been originally skeptical about. So that's an important part of self-management. When it comes to leadership, our intuition is usually a very useful tool. A lot of times when we are struggling to make a decision, we have very short timelines, and we need to have a decision made quickly. So we develop a series of operating rules, guidelines, often we call them heuristics, that allow us to quickly make decisions. And it's very useful, particularly when we are under a lot of pressure. But most of the time, although the intuitions usually serve us well, there are times that it doesn't. So when the urgency passes, it's important to take time to reconsider our decisions that we made in the heat of the moment and really consider whether or not that was the right choice. A lot of times these snap decisions and judgments we make with very limited information, and if we have some more time to dwell on it, we may realize a mistake that we had made and take the time to correct it. In addition, we should also remember that not every decision requires an immediate decision choice to be made. So what we should do is, if there's not a lot of urgency to make a choice, let's give ourselves some time to take in all the information that's available for us and to avoid jumping to a preliminary decision before it's necessarily needed to happen. This will allow us to, if we just defer the choice a little bit, the chances of making a good choice goes up. Finally, when it comes to influence. Now, whether you are a salesperson or just somebody who has a good idea they want to share with other people, we need to understand that the same Star Trek scene that I discussed earlier is playing out in every person we are interacting with. And that there's a Dr. McCoy probably going to make an initial decision and assessment of us and our idea within the first few seconds. And if we can get Dr. McCoy on our side, the chances are that those defenses and those reluctance to embrace new ideas will fall. And that makes them more accessible to what we're trying to tell them. On the contrary, if we were to find a way to get Mr. McCoy on a bit more fearful or angry, then those barriers are going to be right up in our face, and it'll be very hard for us to connect with the audience. So when I think about having a conversation with somebody else, I'm mindful of this. I try to plan my conversations and do my pitches in ways that allow me to connect with the preferences of the Dr. McCoy and other people's heads. And if you recall, in the last vlog, we discussed Bob Bogle and his story with interacting with Sam Walton, who he was trying to get Mr. Walton to agree to name the new big box store Walmart. Now, although Mr. Walton had an issue with humility, Bob Bogle was able to reach across and reach through that objection by appealing to Sam's frugality. So obviously he knew the right way to reach the Dr. McCoy in Sam Walton's head. Now, I hope this lesson has been helpful for you. It touches on several important aspects of being a professional: self-management, leadership, and influence. And I hope you will apply this idea to your workplaces and to your lives as a whole. That's all for today. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.